Le Mans isn't just a race, it's a battlefield. A grueling 24-hour war where machines are pushed to their absolute limits and only the strongest survive. But amidst the chaos, some cars did more than just conquer the track. They stole the show, turning heads with jaw-dropping beauty that made even the most hardened racers stop and stare. From sculpted Ferraris to radical Bugattis, these machines were as artistic as they were lethal. And today, we're counting down the 7 most beautiful Le Mans cars of all time. But trust me, when we get to number 1, you'll understand why some drivers swore it was the most dangerous distraction on the track. Let's dive in. Number 7. Bugatti. Type 57G tank. Close your eyes and picture Le Mans in 1937. Smoke rising from the pits, the smell of fuel thick in the air. A lineup of open-wheel monsters all looking ready for battle. And then, this. A fully enclosed, futuristic-looking machine rolls onto the grid. A car so radical, so ahead of its time, that it doesn't even look like it belongs in the same race. Meet the Bugatti Type 57G tank. A car so revolutionary that it redesigned the blueprint for endurance racing. Built by John Bugatti, the son of the legendary Ettore Bugatti, the Type 57G wasn't just about sheer power. It was aerodynamics perfected, a car that sliced through the wind like a fighter jet on wheels. With a 3.3-liter inline-8 engine producing 200 horsepower, it may not sound insane today, but back in the 30s, it was an absolute beast. Then came Le Mans 1937, a race where open-wheel cars struggled against wind resistance, fighting their own aerodynamics as much as their rivals. But the tank? It glided effortlessly, barely breaking a sweat as it crushed the competition and secured Bugatti's first and only outright Le Mans victory. This wasn't just a win, it was a statement. A car that proved racing was evolving, that aesthetics and aerodynamics could exist in perfect harmony. And if you think this car was ahead of its time, wait till you see our next pick. An Aston Martin so breathtaking, even James Bond would trade in his DB5 for a lap around the track. Number 6. Aston Martin DBR1. There are race cars, and then there are works of art that just happen to be fast. The Aston Martin DBR1? That's the kind of car that belongs in a museum, a racetrack, and a billionaire's private collection, all at once. Introduced in 1956, the DBR1 wasn't just Aston Martin's best, it was their golden ticket to dethroning the giants of endurance racing. And unlike the British, aggressive machines it competed against, the DBR1 was about grace, finesse, and unshakable composure. With its fluid, sculpted bodywork, an open cockpit that put the driver at one with the wind, and a minimalist yet aggressive stance, it was easily one of the most beautiful race cars ever built. But it wasn't just looks. The DBR1 could dance. Powered by a 3.0-liter inline-6 producing 255 horsepower, it wasn't the most powerful car on the grid, but it was feather-light, agile, and flawlessly balanced. Then came 1959, a race that would etch the DBR1 into motorsport history. Driven by none other than Carroll Shelby and Roy Salvadori, this car didn't just compete, it conquered, bringing home Aston Martin's first and only outright Le Mans victory. It was a masterpiece in motion, a car that proved beauty and speed weren't mutually exclusive. But now, let's move from elegance to raw, untamed Ferrari aggression. Up next, a car that shook the foundations of endurance racing and delivered Ferrari's last great Le Mans victory. Number 5. Ferrari 250 LM. Ferrari, Ferrari, Ferrari. Just the name alone screams speed, passion, and racing royalty. But the 250 LM? This car was different. Some Ferraris are built for the road. Some are built for the track. But the Ferrari 250 LM, this was built for immortality. Unveiled in 1963, the 250 LM was Ferrari's boldest gamble yet. It abandoned the front-engine layout of the legendary 250 GTO and became one of Ferrari's first mid-engine endurance racers. That was a radical move, one that Enzo Ferrari believed would change the game forever. And under the hood, a 3.3-liter V12 producing 320 horsepower, pure screaming Ferrari fury. Paired with a lightweight chassis and an insanely responsive handling setup, this car wasn't just fast, it was surgical. But here's where things get interesting. Despite being designed as a GT car, the motorsport authorities refused to classify it as one. Why? Because Ferrari didn't produce the required 100 units for homologation. That meant the 250 LM was forced to race in the prototype category, going up against faster purpose-built race cars instead of its intended rivals. That should have been the end of its story. But this is Ferrari we're talking about. Fast forward to Le Mans, 1965. The race was brutal, engines failing, tires shredding, and teams pushing their cars past the breaking point. The big favorites? They were dropping like flies. And then, against all odds, a privately entered 250 LM from the North American racing team NART did the impossible. Driven by Jochen Rindt and Maston Gregory, this underdog Ferrari outlasted the field, taking Ferrari's last outright victory at Le Mans. Think about that. The last time Ferrari stood on the top step of Le Mans, it was thanks to this very car. It was beautiful, rebellious, and victorious against all odds, a true racing masterpiece. But Ferrari's Le Mans dominance was about to face its greatest challenge yet, because up next, a Porsche so terrifyingly fast, it rewrote the rulebook on endurance racing. Number 4. Porsche 917K. Some cars win races, others terrify their competition. And then there's the Porsche 917K, a machine so fast, so brutally dominant, that it almost got banned. By the late 1960s, Porsche was desperate for an outright Le Mans victory. They had speed, precision, and engineering brilliance. But endurance racing wasn't just about going fast. It was about lasting 24 grueling hours without breaking down. And up until that point, Porsche's prototypes kept falling short. So they built a monster. The 917 debuted in 1969, and it was an absolute missile, a car that could hit over 240 miles per hour down the legendary Mulsanne Straight. But there was a problem. At high speeds, the car was almost uncontrollable. Drivers described it as terrifying, saying it floated at full throttle like it was barely touching the ground. Even Porsche's best engineers couldn't figure out how to stabilize it. Until they did. In 1970, Porsche introduced the 917K, a short-tail version designed to fix the car's high-speed instability. With a redesigned rear end, improved aerodynamics, and increased downforce, the 917K was finally tamed. And once they got it right, it was unstoppable. Under the hood was a 4.5-liter to 5.0-liter flat 12 engine, cranking out 600 horsepower. But it wasn't just about power. It was about how effortlessly it delivered it. The 917K was light, stable, and brutally efficient, making it the perfect endurance weapon. Then came Le Mans, 1970. Rain poured down over the Circuit de la Sarthe. Visibility was near zero. Cars were hydroplaning, spinning, and crashing out one by one. But the 917K, it was surgically precise. Through the chaos, the crashes, the brutal 24-hour battle, the 917,000 didn't just win, it crushed the competition, securing Porsche's first-ever outright Le Mans victory. And as if that wasn't enough, it came back in 1971 and won again, setting a distance record that stood for nearly 40 years. But beyond its dominance, the 917K was a masterpiece. With its sleek, flowing bodywork, massive rear haunches, and iconic Gulf livery, it didn't just look fast, it looked deadly. A car so beautiful, so menacing, that it became one of the most recognizable race cars of all time. But if you thought this was peak beauty, wait until you see our next car, a Jaguar so elegant, It looked like it belonged in an art gallery, not on a racetrack. Number 3. Jaguar D-Type. Some cars are built for speed, others are designed for beauty. The Jaguar D-Type? It was both. Aerodynamics sculpted into pure art. By the mid-1950s, Jaguar was already a dominant force in endurance racing. Their C-Type had won Le Mans twice, but Jaguar wanted something faster, sleeker, and more advanced. So in 1954, they unveiled the D-Type, and the world had never seen anything like it. With its sleek, curvaceous body, a teardrop-shaped cockpit, and that instantly recognizable vertical stabilizer fin, the D-Type looked like it belonged in a wind tunnel, not a racetrack. But this wasn't just about aesthetics. Every inch of the D-Type was designed for maximum speed and stability. At its heart was a 3.4-liter straight-six engine, later upgraded to 3.8 liters, pushing out 300 horsepower. But the real magic? Jaguar pioneered the use of monocoque construction, a technique borrowed from aviation, which made the D-Type lighter, stronger, and more aerodynamic than anything else on the grid. This was racing technology years ahead of its time. Then came Le Mans, 1955. While the world was still reeling from the tragic accident that year, the D-Type proved unstoppable, taking its first victory. But Jaguar wasn't done. In 1956, it won again. And in 1957, it didn't just win, it dominated the field. Jaguar destroyed the competition, with D-Types finishing first, second, third, fourth, and sixth. This was Le Mans history being written in real time, a moment that cemented Jaguar's place as an endurance racing legend. And the D-Type? It wasn't just fast, it was gorgeous. A car so elegant, so effortlessly beautiful, that even today it looks like a piece of art that just happens to move at 170 miles per hour. But if you think this car was stunning, wait until you see our next entry. A Ferrari so breathtaking, Enzo himself called it one of the greatest cars his company ever built. Number 2. Ferrari 330 P4. Some cars win races. Some cars win hearts. But the Ferrari 330 P4, it did both, and looked like a masterpiece sculpted by the gods of speed themselves. By 1966, Ferrari was in trouble. Their Le Mans dominance was over. The previous year, Ford had humiliated them, locking out the podium with a brutal 1-2-3 finish. Enzo Ferrari was furious. His machines had been unstoppable for a decade, and now they'd been dethroned by an American muscle car? So Ferrari did what Ferrari does best. They fought back. And in 1967 they unveiled their revenge, the 330 P4. From the moment you laid eyes on it, the 330 P4 was mesmerizing. Its low-slung stance, aggressive air intakes, and perfectly sculpted curves made it look like it had been crafted by the wind itself. The swooping fenders, the bubble-shaped cockpit, the way the body seemed to hug the road, it was the kind of design that made grown men weak at the knees. But it wasn't just a pretty face. Underneath, the 330 P4 packed a 4.0-liter V12, producing 450 horsepower. Unlike the raw, brute-force approach of the Ford GT40, the P4 was precision engineering at its finest, lighter, nimbler, and designed to carve through corners with effortless grace. Then came the 1967 24 Hours of Daytona, the first major endurance race after Ford's crushing Le Mans victory. Ferrari had a point to prove, and they proved it in the most humiliating way possible. As the race neared its end, 3 Ferrari P4s lined up in formation, crossing the finish line together, a 1-2-3 sweep in front of Ford's home crowd. It was a message. Ferrari was back. But when they returned to Le Mans in 1967, the GT40s struck back, outlasting the Ferraris to take another victory. The P4 had won the battle, but lost the war. Still, its legacy was untouchable. To this day, it's considered one of the most beautiful Ferraris ever built, a car that blended artistry and aggression in a way only Ferrari could. But now, we've reached number 1, a car so stunning, so dominant, that it redefined what a race car could be. And the craziest part? It was never even meant to race in the first place. Number 1. McLaren F1 GTR. Some cars are built for racing. Some are built for legacy. But this one? This one was built to be the greatest car of all time. The McLaren F1 wasn't supposed to be a Le Mans legend. In fact, it wasn't even supposed to be a race car at all. It was designed as the ultimate road car, a machine so pure, so meticulously engineered that McLaren never intended for it to compete. But when private teams saw its unmatched speed and precision, they begged McLaren to let it loose on the track. And in 1995, the F1 GTR was born. McLaren made only minimal changes to the road-going F1. A bit of weight reduction, some slight aerodynamic tweaks, and that was it. Why? Because the original McLaren F1 was already faster than most race cars. At its heart was a naturally aspirated 6.1-liter BMW V12, producing over 600 horsepower. But the real magic? This car was light, incredibly light. With a carbon fiber monocoque, it was one of the most advanced road cars ever built. And unlike most race cars, which sacrificed comfort for performance, the McLaren F1 had a centrally positioned driver's seat, giving the driver perfect weight distribution and visibility. It was a flawless machine. But here's where things get crazy. Le Mans in 1995 was supposed to be a battle of purpose-built prototypes, cars designed from the ground up to dominate endurance racing. No one expected a slightly modified road car to stand a chance. But the F1 GTR didn't just stand a chance, it dominated. Through 24 grueling hours, as factory-backed teams struggled with reliability issues, the McLaren kept going. It was fast, efficient, and relentless, handling the demands of Le Mans with the precision of a scalpel. By the final laps, the unthinkable had happened. A McLaren F1 GTR, an endurance rookie, was leading the entire race. And when the checkered flag dropped, the McLaren F1 GTR had won Le Mans outright, not just in its category. Overall, beating purpose-built Le Mans prototypes in a car that people could drive on the street. It was one of the most shocking victories in racing history, and a moment that cemented the F1 GTR as one of the greatest race cars ever made. But beyond its dominance, the McLaren F1 GTR was simply stunning. Its butterfly doors, sculpted aerodynamics, and aggressive yet elegant stance made it look like something from the future. Even standing still, it looked like it was breaking the sound barrier, a car so perfect that it never needed a second chance at Le Mans. Because once was enough to make history. And that's why the McLaren F1 GTR isn't just a Le Mans legend. It's the most beautiful race car to ever grace the track. And there you have it, the 7 most beautiful Le Mans cars of all time. These weren't just machines. They were rolling works of art, cars that didn't just race, but defined an era. But now it's your turn. Did we get it right? Did we miss a car that should have made the list? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you love content like this, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, we've got plenty more legendary machines to talk about. Until next time, keep chasing speed.